Yushan died, but she came back to life. As the all-powerful king of the 5 spiritual roots in the foreign world, she died on the battlefield being stabbed by her subordinates. Unexpectedly, when she opened her eyes, she became a prisoner of exile, going to be exiled to Ezhou where malaria and disease were rampant. Faced with the inhumane and cruel treatment of female prisoners by the government officials, Yushan said she couldn't bear it. But she didn't expect that she would help her sister solve the yamen task before, and then her disabled and disfigured husband would attract countless assassins. This is clearly someone who wants them to die. On the road of exile, facing numerous crises, can she run first? Zhou Yan's deep eyes sparkled with paranoia, wanting to run. No way. She is destined to be her own in this life. Even if she ran to the ends of the earth, he would catch her back, tie her up in chains, and lock her by his side. Zhou Yan is tragic, but he is also lucky. When his family was destroyed and he was falsely accused and exiled, when he is about to fall into hell forever, become a bloodthirsty demon, and also want to kill all the people in the world, to be buried with his family. The heavens sent her to redeem themselves. She is a beam of light in his desperate life. Zhou Yan's mouth curved into a wicked smile, and in the next moment, his eyes were filled with grievances. He said pitifully, "Madam, I'm afraid, madam, seeking comfort, 100 rounds of steel refining to turn fingers into softness. It's just death." He also wants to pester her. "Madam, if you leave, who will warm your nest?" Chapter 1. The king of the other realms crosses to the road of exile. You are listening at novel.full.audio. Yushan woke up amidst a deafening cry, "Where is this?" She looked strangely at the thick trees blocking the sky and the dry yellow soil around her. This is a strange mountain forest, how could she suddenly appear here? Isn't she dead? Died on a battlefield in a foreign world, stabbed in the back by subordinates. As a general of the 5 series spirit root almighty king in a foreign world, she is a heart-wrenching presence on the battlefield, with the title of indifferent Yenluo. She never expected herself to die so miserably. Before Yushan could figure out why she appeared in this unfamiliar world, her body was suddenly violently thrown to the ground. Her head also slammed heavily on the protruding stones on the ground, making a loud thud. Yushan's body lay soft and fluffy on the ground, stirring up a burst of dust. She opened her eyes in pain, and a chilling light flashed through her sharp eyes. Surprisingly, someone dared to throw themselves at will. She saw that he was looking for death. Yushan's cold eyes flashed like ice, and the next moment she was shocked by the sudden image in her mind and opened her mouth wide. Various unfamiliar scenes flashed through her mind like a movie. That was the first half of a woman's life. Her left face was covered in red birthmarks, which were covered in black threads resembling blood vessels. Her whole face was ugly and frightening. But the girl's intact right face, white as snow, handsome eyebrows, slightly uplifted Danfeng's eyes with charm, small red lips like flame, spotless red, and the sharp jaw line all show that this is the same face as her. The girl's birth mother passed away early, and because of her terrifying left face, she was despised by everyone in the Prime Minister's mansion. Even her own biological father despised her, disgusted her, and wished for her to die. Indifferently and ruthlessly, she was left to fend for herself in the dilapidated backyard, being rubbed by her stepmother and stepsister. In order to survive and raise her only sister, she is humble, cowardly, and timid. She is bullied by the masters and servants in the mansion like a dog. Suong, the scumbag father, even more for the sake of power, used her only sister to force her to replace her eldest sister and married Zhou Yan, the current Marquis of Yong'an, who had an engagement with her, but now had legs disabled and disfigured. She was pulled onto a bridal sedan chair like a marionette, taken to the hall of worship, and then imprisoned by the Hanlon guard. Finally, she passed away on the road of exile. From beginning to end, no one in the Prime Minister's mansion cared about her except for the original owner's sister. She is like a hard-working old ox who has finally been drained of the last bit of value by her own father. Watching the miserable life of this poor woman, Yushan's always cold heart suddenly flashed with sadness and sadness. That's not her emotions, it's the original owners. Yushan's cold and icy eyes shed a clear tear, flowing from the corner of her eye and disappearing into the yellow soil. Live a heavy life, without those heavy responsibilities weighing down on oneself like mountains, and without the step pressure of a mentor who is as grateful as family on oneself. In this life, she wants to live freely, and never pay attention to anything in the secular world again. Woo-woo. Help us. Suddenly, Yushan's ears were filled with a series of crying sounds, low and dark, indicating that it was a suppressed cry. She looked around restlessly, searching for the figures of Zhou Zhao and Zhou Noa everywhere. On the right behind Yushan, prisoners dressed in white prison clothes huddled together, listening to their daughters and wives calling for help. They dared not resist. These officials are not human beings, they are just some powerless people who dare not resist the officials. They only want to survive. Yushan looked at Zhou Noa, who was fainting not far from her, and her pupils shrank rapidly. Her eyes searched everywhere for Zhou Zhao. A man covered in blood in the distance crawled forward, and the bright red blood streaked along his knees on the dirt. Zhou Yanmu's eyes were torn apart, he hated himself for being a useless person and not being able to save his sister. He hates those who frame his whole family. He hates these inhumane government officials even more. This is the dynasty they brought to life with their entire family, all in one fell swoop. What did they get? Framing. Defamation. Bullying. Now it's even more like falling into the mud, anyone can step on it. Bullying recklessly. Zhou Yan looked up at the sky and roared loudly. He wanted to tear these people apart, but his legs were disabled and his tendons were torn. Now he can only roar like a waste. Ah! Animal! You let go of my sister. Yushan followed Zhou Yan's figure and looked towards the place where there was a burst of crying. There were all young girls in prison clothes, and Zhou Zhao shrank there trembling. The yamen guards looked at the female prisoners who couldn't resist with a wicked smile. Some of them couldn't bear to pull the outermost woman and carried her to the deep grass forest. Yushan's eyes are about to crack, these beasts. Watching Zhou Zhao being pulled down by the yamen guard, Yushan's eyes were filled with killing intent. She worked hard to accumulate strength to control this body. She wants to save Zhou Zhao. But unfortunately, her soul had a violent resistance reaction with this body. Her whole body was soft and fluffy, and apart from being able to open her eyes, her brain couldn't control the limbs of this body at all. Zhou Zhao trembled all over and was pulled away by the yamen. She wanted to resist, but was slapped a few times by the yamen. The yamen carried her into the grass forest. She screamed in terror. Ah! Brother! Help me! Brother! Zhou Yan's heart was filled with despair and anger, and his eyes were also soaked with blood. He roared fiercely. Let go of my sister. Otherwise, I will make sure you all die hard. The yamen runner walked over with Zhou Zhao sneering and stepped on Zhou Yan's head. Just rely on you paralytic. If it were before, I would still be afraid of him, but now the yamen runner cruelly stepped on Zhou Yan's head, even though he had been tightly twisted into the soil by the yamen runner's foot, resembling a dead dog. Zhou Yan's hateful eyes still stared at him, never showing any cowardice. The yamen guard looked at him with a look of wanting to eat himself, not afraid at all. Instead, he disdainfully spat and laughed, carrying Zhou Zhao as he was about to leave. Zhou Zhao saw her brother being bullied and her eyes turned red with anger. She fiercely bit the ear of the magistrate. The yamen runner felt pain and forcefully threw Zhou Zhao to the ground. He touched his ears and saw the blood red on his palms. Anger erupted in his eyes, and then he grinned and began to undress. You scumbag! I'll let you know the consequences of provoking me. After finishing speaking, he rushed towards Zhou. Zhou Yan quickly climbed up, wrapped his arms around his legs, and then bit the yamen runner's leg tightly, wishing to tear off a piece of meat from his leg. The yamen runner felt pain and saw his bleeding leg with a fierce look in his eyes. His other foot kicked towards Zhou Yan's head. His brain went blank, and Zhou Yan was instantly knocked unconscious by his kick. He rolled over a few times and lay motionless on the ground. The yamen officer snorted coldly and raised his hand to start tearing at Zhou Zhao's clothes. Zhou Zhao resisted Tiger Biao with great effort, but was soon beaten by Tiger Biao, with stars in his eyes, a swollen face, and blood flowing from the corners of his mouth. Zhou Zhao looked at Yushan lying not far from him, her eyes filled with fear and despair. She cried out in despair. Sister-in-law! Help me! Chapter 2. Someone wants Zhou Yan to die on the road right now. You are listening at novel.Audio. Suddenly a lingering shadow flashed past, and Tiger Biao, who was abusing Zhou Zhao, was instantly kicked away. Pop it. The yamen runner was kicked into the forest by the violent Yushan, and his head hit the stone hard, immediately causing a big bump. Yushan's eyes flashed with dissatisfaction with this body. Based on her previous strength, the yamen runner should have been kicked in the head by herself. The yamen runner Hu Biao was kicked by Yushan to eat shit. The other yamen runners Chao Xian and his subordinates who were pulling female prisoners into the forest stopped to look at him and laughed loudly. I said, Biao Zi, you can't do it. Do you want your brothers to help? Hu Biao spat out the blood in his mouth fiercely towards the ground, and he looked at Yushan with malice, saying in a resentful voice. No need. Yushan looked at the fierce yamen runner walking towards her, with a strong murderous intent in her eyes. Since this beast is seeking death, she will send him to the west. Hu Biao was taken aback by Yushan's cold and lifeless gaze. This woman is really a damn cult, and he needs to be careful when dealing with it. Yushan Mo's merciless eyes looked at him contemptuously, and then a strange green light flashed in his eyes, ready to directly kill Tiger Biao. Suddenly, her heart and mouth stopped breathing, and her breath began to become chaotic. Her whole body's strength seemed to be instantly drained, and she began to fall weakly to the ground. Zhou Zhao was so frightened that he stumbled up from the ground and caught her fallen body, saying in terror. Sister-in-law. Yushan clearly felt that she had forcefully activated her powers, and her body, which was not yet compatible with her own soul, had a violent resistance reaction, pulling and tugging at each other, not letting anyone down. Her soul was also rapidly depleting its energy due to the need to compete with this body for dominance, and she began to uncontrollably want to fall into a deep sleep. Yushan's eyes sparkled fiercely, as she struggled to bite the tip of her tongue with her teeth. The piercing pain in her tongue made her feel a little more alert. Yushan lay in Zhou Zhao's arms, squinting at Hu Biao, who was walking towards her with a smile from Feng Xie. Hu Biao saw Yushan suddenly limp and powerless in Zhou Zhao's arms, and his eyes were full of malice. This woman, who had just lost someone in front of her own brother, he wouldn't let her go. Humph. It turned out to be a paper tiger. Since you're trying to kill yourself, don't blame me for being impolite. Not far away, Zhou Yan, who had just woken up, crawled up in front of Zhou Zhao and Yushan with a mouth full of blood, trying to use his own body to resist Hu Biao. His mouth was speechless due to Tiger Biao's strong kick just now, but his eyes were full of killing intent towards Tiger Biao. He will kill this beast. He must make this beast worse off than dead. Hu Biao saw the killing intent in Zhou Yan's eyes clearly, but he was not afraid at all. If it were Zhou Yan, the former Marquis of Yong'an, he might not dare to touch him, but now, Hu Biao snorted disdainfully and then quickly kicked him fiercely. Behind Zhou Yan are Zhou Zhao and Su Yushan. He cannot avoid them, otherwise it will be them who are injured. He could only resist Tiger Biao's kick, attempting to encircle Tiger Biao's legs with his arms once again, and then tear off the flesh from his legs with his teeth. But his intention was detected by Hu Biao. Hu Biao dodged the arm that Zhou Yan had extended to him, and then quickly kicked him hard towards the head. A piercing roar immediately rang in Zhou Yan's ear, followed by his tattered body rolling a few times, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and completely fainting. Zhou Zhao looked at Zhou Yan, who had fainted, with worried eyes in her eyes. She screamed in panic. "Brother!" Hu Biao approached with a wicked smile, ignoring Zhou Zhao's resistance and grabbing Zhou Zhao and Yushan one by one, dragging them into the forest. His gaze towards Yushan was filled with malicious thoughts, and he sneered. "Since you are so rushed, then I will comply with your wishes." The surrounding yamen guards watched as Hu Biao grabbed the ghostly-faced Yushan into the forest, and all burst into laughter. "Biao Zi is really good. Even such an ugly woman can speak up." Chao Xian, the yamen runner who abused the female prisoner, looked at Lin Han and his henchmen standing far away from the male prisoner, with disdain and ridicule in his eyes, and said with ill intentions. "Head. Do you want to enjoy it too?" Lin Han was wearing a yamen uniform and holding a big knife. He gave Chao Xian a cold glance, disdaining to do such a dirty thing. Today is the day when male and female prisoners meet. He didn't expect Chao Xian to be so confident and fearless. He dared to openly commit violence just 1,000 miles away from the capital. He looked down on Chao Xian's character and disdained his actions, but he couldn't touch Chao Xian. Chao Xian was a temporary envoy sent to accompany him on this trip. Although he appeared to be the leader, in reality, Chao Xian and his group of subordinates did not listen to him. So he couldn't control them himself, and he only wanted to successfully complete this task without meddling. So usually he and Chao Xian don't care about anyone's affairs. As long as they don't kill people casually, the number of places to work has been greatly reduced, making it difficult for him to work. Lin Han usually follows him. Lin Han glanced at him and then turned his head, no longer looking at them. He said coldly, "Don't cause any harm to people, otherwise it will be difficult to explain when you arrive at the place." Chao Xian snorted coldly twice, and he knew that Lin Han dared not interfere with himself. "Don't worry, boss." Lin Han watched coldly as Chao Xian and the others dragged people into the forest, then turned around with his subordinates and sat down at the remaining male prisoners, finding a spot to sit down and trying not to hear the screams in the forest. His gaze turned towards Zhou Yan, who had already fainted from blood in the distance, and he couldn't bear it. "I actually admire Zhou Yan, a great hero who defends our country and protects our home. They are the loyal and heroic members of the Yong'an Marquis' mansion, and they are the objects of my admiration." He can still think of a few months ago, in May this year, when Zhou Yan, the youngest son of the Marquis of Yong'an, returned to the capital wearing armor to support his spirit. The war horse set out, the coffin went first, and the white flag spread across the sky. On that day, the people of the capital were all shocked by the white flags that could not be seen from the city gate, and the whole country was in tears of pain. Lin Han sighed deeply when he thought of the loyal and martyred Yong'an Marquis' mansion, and his thoughts couldn't help but feel that they had drifted to the beginning of this year, in February of the 43rd year of the Qianyuan reign. At that time, news was transmitted from the border to the capital that Zhou Rang, the Marquis of Yong'an, also held the position of General of Cavalry in cavalry. In just a few days, he defeated 400,000 enemy troops of the Kingdom of Dewan at the border. The final battle was even more brutal. The Marquis of Yong'an and his companions were besieged by the Dayuan army in Jixia city for several months, running out of ammunition and food, almost completely annihilating the army, and there were millions of floating corpses on the battlefield. Even women, children, and children in the Yong'an Marquis' mansion picked up their swords to kill the enemy, fought to the death, and finally regained the 10 cities plundered by the Kingdom of Dayuan. When the news reached Kyoto, the whole country was in celebration. Every common person in the capital is grateful for the heroic deeds of the entire Yong'an Marquis' mansion, who knows that things are unpredictable. Only 2 months after Zhou Yan Fuling returned to the capital, the Marquis's mansion of Yong'an was sentenced to theft and execution due to conspiring with King Jin to seize the throne. King Jin was demoted to a commoner and imprisoned in secret alleys. If it weren't for the emperor's favored concubine Yuehua, who committed suicide and apologized in front of the court, and then the Manmen Marquis's mansion would have been sentenced to exile, it is likely that there would still be no one alive in the Yong'an Marquis's mansion, probably because they have already been killed by the emperor. Lin Han's eyes flickered with sympathy towards Zhou Yan, wondering whether the Yong'an Marquis's mansion had conspired to seize the throne. The people all over the capital could understand. He had the intention not to make things difficult for Zhou Yan, so that the remaining people of the Marquis's mansion could smoothly reach the exiled land of Ezhou. Ezhou is located in the southernmost part of the Yuan dynasty, which is a barbaric land where miasma and diseases are rampant year-round. People with discerning eyes can tell at a glance that the person above the sky did not even want Zhou Yan to live. But he is just a small yamen runner, with little talk. He originally wanted Zhou Yan and the others to arrive in Ezhou smoothly, but some people couldn't wait anymore. Now they want Zhou Yan to die on the road. Lin Han shuddered involuntarily at the thought of that person's fierce gaze. He can't resist. Chapter 3. She is the bloodthirsty reaper from hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Han recalled the scene of that day, the crying of his family in the dark house, and the fierce gaze that the person gave him. His heart flashed with pain and determination. My family has been detained in the hands of that person. He is not a kind-hearted master, and for the sake of my family's life. Lin Han's gaze flickered again and again, filled with deep helplessness. There's no way, for the sake of his family, he can only let Zhou Yan die on the road. Lin Han let out a deep sigh and turned his head no longer to look at Zhou Yan, who was unbearable on the ground. In the forest Yushan was tightly hugged by Zhou Zhao, even though she was so scared that she shook her whole body. Faced with the tiger who was about to abuse her, Zhou Zhao still refused to let go of herself and fled first, but tightly protected her. Thinking back on the road of exile, Zhou Zhao took meticulous care of herself, who was still unconscious when she first entered this body. Yushan's cold and icy heart suddenly cracked, and in this unfamiliar world, she felt the warmth of a long time ago in Zhou Zhao. Is this the feeling of family? No matter when, where, or in any situation, she will not abandon herself or betray herself. Even if she is in danger, she has not left herself to run first. Yushan was confused. In her past life, she was an orphan. Although she had a master like a family member, her master valued responsibility more than herself. She was the object that could be abandoned by her master at any time, and she was gradually distancing herself from her master under his coercion. Now that I have died, I can be considered as fully repaying the kindness of my master's upbringing. And subordinates. Their interests are what they value the most. Otherwise they wouldn't be tempted by petty gains and choose to betray themselves. The feeling of a family living and dying together was so warm, and waves of warmth flowed through Yushan's heart, causing her cold and hard heart to loosen. Hu Biao originally wanted to solve Yushan first to vent his hatred, but he looked at Yushan's fierce red birthmark and felt that he was not satisfied. He couldn't help but sarcastically say, "Your fierce face is really disgusting." Hu Biao strode forward and was about to pull Yushan aside. Yushan's tongue had already been bitten open by herself, covered in blood, but she couldn't sleep. She wanted to save Zhou Zhao. "You go away." Zhou Zhao protected Yushan with one hand and blocked Hu Biao from pulling her forward with the other. However, as a weak woman, she was ultimately pulled away by Hu Biao's strong force. Zhou Zhao was thrown into the grass by Hu Biao, and she screamed in fear as she looked at Hu Biao rushing towards her. She pressed her hands on the ground and kept moving back, her eyes filled with fear and despair. Looking at Zhou Zhao, who couldn't resist his beautiful demeanor even though his face was swollen and raised, Hu Biao pounced with a smile on his face. Zhou Zhao vigorously kicked and beat him, resisted hard, and shouted in despair. "Ah! Get out of here!" Yushan was roughly thrown to the ground by Hu Biao. She gritted her silver teeth and wanted to stand up, but as soon as she stood up crookedly, she fell hard to the ground again. Her head hit the sharp corner of the stone on the ground, and blood instantly flowed all over the ground, onto the white crescent birthmark on her arm. A strange green light shining brightly instantly swam along her arm from the crescent birthmark, flowing through the 7 meridians and 8 meridians within her body, all of which surged towards her heart like a tide. Here. Zhou Zhao's prison clothes were torn by Hu Biao, and she closed her eyes in despair. A tear flowed from the corner of her eye. "I'm sorry, brother. Zhao is going to find his parents." Puff. Fresh red blood spurted out of Tiger Biao's mouth, and he widened his eyes in fear. Tiger Biao mechanically lowered his head to look at his chest, where a huge hole had rotted out, and blood flowed out along the hollow hole. The cold wind in the mountain forest whizzed through the hole, and his blood seemed to have been chilled by the wind. It was freezing so hard that he turned back in fear and looked behind him. Yushan's cold and dark eyes flashed with a strange multicolored light, and she stood there coldly and ruthlessly, exuding a murderous aura. Her head was covered in black hair, which was scattered and fluttered by the surging internal energy and strong wind from her body. Looking at Hu Biao, there was a murderous glow in her eyes. Accompanied by her ghostly left face, Su Yushan at this moment was like a bloodthirsty death god from hell. "You!" Hu Biao's eyes mechanically turned, and he only had time to say a word before completely losing his breath and falling behind. Everything happened too quickly, as if in just one breath it took Tiger Biao's life. Zhou Zhao opened her eyes in terror, with the determination to commit suicide in her eyes. She stared blankly at Hu Biao lying on the ground, her hands and feet limp and unable to move a single bit. Yushan coldly and mercilessly glanced at Hu Biao's corpse, her deep black eyes devoid of any warmth, cold and bloodthirsty. At this moment, Zhou Zhao suddenly felt as if she was a ruthless killing machine. Zhou Zhao's body was cold and stiff from Yushan's murderous gaze, and his heart was pounding incessantly. She looked at Yushan with some fear, trembling and unable to make any sound. Yushan endured the excruciating pain of cramping and bone stripping, gently lifting her arm as she continued to run around. Her internal strength, which was tumbling over the river and sea, instantly turned into countless invisible blades and flew towards the surrounding yamen servants who were abusing her. So countless people witnessed such a strange scene, only to see a sharp cold wind suddenly blowing in the forest, and then all the guards in the forest were bulging their eyes, spitting blood from their mouths. The bright red blood, in the sunlight, rained like raindrops on the grass in the forest. Puff. 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 The yamen guards stared blankly as they lowered their heads to look at their suddenly swollen chest, and then made a strange, gurgling sound in their throats, before losing all breath and falling to the ground to death. Ah! 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 The forest echoed with the screams of female prisoners. The female prisoners watched in terror as the yamen suddenly collapsed to the ground, wrapped in torn clothes, and frantically fled backwards. The sudden scream in the forest made Lin Han, who was guarding the prisoners on the outskirts, and several other yamen runners quickly realized that something was wrong. They all immediately stood up from the ground. Lin Han's expression was serious, and he instructed his subordinates. "Leave 1 or 2 people to guard the prisoners, and the rest will come with me." When Lin Han arrived at the forest with his subordinates, he saw such a thoroughly killed Yushan. Lin Han looked at her red and black, bloodthirsty eyes, and his heart trembled unconsciously. With just one glance, he was extremely certain that this woman had killed people, and quite a few. "The smell of her is too familiar to me. It's the same smell of a general as Zhou Yan. Only those who kill people on the battlefield all the year round can develop such a fearsome killing spirit. The difference is that Zhou Yan has a strong killing aura and a chilling cold aura because he is a military general and has fought on the battlefield. Lin Han couldn't understand why he could see scenes of her bloodthirsty battlefield even on an ordinary woman in the backyard. He quietly grasped the big knife at his waist, and his gaze towards Yushan became wary. You. Chapter 4. Sister-in-law. There are wolves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yushan's deep red eyes turned towards Lin Han. With only a faint glance, Lin Han was so frightened that he almost couldn't hold the knife in his hand. Yushan was not feeling well at the moment. She was enduring intense pain from the layers of muscle and skin twitching in her meridians, like waves. She walked one wave after another, and so repeatedly, her prison clothes had already been soaked in cold sweat. She forcefully endowed this body with the powers inherent in her soul, at the cost of her blood boiling like boiling, surging and burning all over her bones and 7 meridians and 8 meridians. The burning meridians were desperately resisting the scorching flames, fighting against her soul. She now had a faint tendency to go berserk, and her cells all over her body were eager to kill. Yushan's forehead was sweating profusely, and she gritted her teeth. Her gums also slightly oozed blood, and her tightly clenched hands had bulging veins. She tried to restrain her bloodthirsty desire like a storm. She cannot engage in mass killings, otherwise she will truly go crazy and become a demon. From then on, she will escape into the demon realm and enjoy killing. She detests the blood and battlefield to the extreme. She doesn't want to be such a ruthless killing machine, otherwise she would have wasted the good intentions of heaven and lived a lifetime in vain. Yushan looked into Lin Han's eyes, which were filled with an overwhelming desire to kill. She gritted her teeth tightly and after a while, she held back a few words, which made her forehead sweat again. If you don't want to die, leave immediately. Yushan's low voice pierced at Lin Han like an ice cone, and in just 1 second, Lin Han immediately left with his subordinates. Head. Chao Xian and his team are dead, do we really care? Shut up. If you don't want to die, just leave. Lin Han glared at his henchman who was looking for death. Didn't he see that this woman had already started to go crazy and was about to launch a killing spree? Sister-in-law. Zhou Zhao looked at Yushanhong's eyes, which seemed to be bleeding with fear. Being stared at by such a pair of bloodthirsty red eyes, Zhou Zhao seemed frozen in place and could not take any further steps. This kind of Yushan is too terrifying. She has never seen such a pair of blood-red eyes, as if one glance can instantly take the other person's life. She wanted to run away, but she was also worried about Yushan. Yushan endured the hardships, and cold sweat flowed down her forehead like rain. She gritted her lips tightly to suppress her irritable bloodthirsty desire. If she didn't release her body's rampage, she would not only be possessed but also die suddenly today. Let's go. Take them away. Hurry up. Zhou Zhao saw something was wrong with Yushan from her furrowed brow, and was so scared that he quickly ran away, leading the female prisoners to prepare to run out of the forest. Owl, owl, sister-in-law. There are wolves. Yushan's red eyes looked into the deep forest. Even though there was a blood mist in front of her, she still noticed the cold green light that began to light up in the distance. In just this moment, they were surrounded by a green glow at a distance of 500 meters in front of them. The crowd watched with fear and trembling all over, and their legs instantly lost their strength to escape. Yushan's red eyes, capable of dripping blood, looked at the wolf pack, with a bloodthirsty desire in their eyes, like maggots attached to bones, tearing at their own bone and blood. Take them away. Quick. Yushan's indifferent red eyes mercilessly looked at the countless green shadows shining around her, with a deep murderous intent in her eyes. The blood on her body was like a volcano erupting at this moment, the scorching heat constantly burning her muscles and bones. If she didn't release the internal energy wandering around in the 7 meridians and 8 meridians, she would explode and die. Let's go. Let's leave the forest first. The bloody smell here is too strong, attracting a pack of wolves. Upon hearing Yushan's words, the female prisoners could no longer hold their tension and ran frantically out of the forest like fleeing for their lives. "There's a pack of wolves. Help!" The wolf pack saw the female prisoners running away and rushed eagerly towards Yushan and the others. These prey were their food today, and no one wanted to run away. Seeing a wild wolf rushing towards the nearest female prisoner, Yushan squinted her eyes in danger and raised her hand, turning countless internal forces into wind stitches and heading towards the wild wolf. Puff! The wild wolf was instantly chopped into countless pieces by the wind and fell to the ground, and the sound of the wind instantly brought up countless bloodstains. Zhou Yan watched the brutal scene and swallowed several times in her nervous throat. Zhou Yan nervously looked at Yushan standing here, still motionless, and hesitantly spoke. "Sister-in-law." Yushan's red eyes gave her a faint glance, signaling that Zhou Yan should not come over. Her whole body was now covered in a violent gust of wind, which would take Zhou Yan's life. "Go find Zhou Noa and your brother." The wild wolves were angered by Yushan, and they gritted their teeth and rushed towards Yushan and Zhou Yan, trying to tear them apart. Yushan made a wind stitch with her left hand, and a green light flashed through her right hand. In an instant, a vine rolled up Zhou Yan and threw her out of the forest. Zhou Yan was thrown out of the forest by Yushan and rolled a few times on the ground. She quickly got up and ran towards Zhou Yan and Zhou Noa. After seeing Zhou Yan safely leave the forest, Yushan could no longer resist the layer after layer of heat waves erupting on her body, and her eyes turned completely red and black. Countless wolf packs instantly surrounded her, and with a command from the head wolf, all the wolf packs immediately rushed towards Yushan. From a distance, the scene here makes one's scalp tingle. Yushan stood there, with a glow of red, orange, yellow, green, and purple swirling around her body. The weapons in her hand were constantly changing, one was a vine, another was a golden sword, and another was a purple whip. Every time she struck, the weapons carried a strong gust of wind. She flipped her wrist and flexibly avoided every wolf that rushed towards her. And with every shot she made, the wild wolf instantly exploded and died, scattered on the grass. The weapon in hand, carrying the strong internal wind running around, fiercely and rapidly hit each wild wolf, instantly exploding into brilliant blood-colored fireworks. The sunlight shone through the dense leaves of the trees, leaving speckled shadows. It also illuminated the bright red blood droplets gushing out everywhere in the air, scattered densely on trees, leaves, green grass, and yellow soil. After tearing open the distant wolf she wanted to escape with the vines in her hand, Yushan frowned in disgust at the strong smell of blood in the air. And the people outside the forest were not feeling well either. The strong smell of blood was blown by the wind, and many people began to retch. In the distant forest, the screams of the wolf pack and the plop sound of the wind blade chopping on the wolf pack were mixed together, instantly turning this mountain forest into a human purgatory. Lin Han led his subordinates to guard the surroundings, and they all heard the howling of the wolf pack in the forest, causing everyone to be startled. Lin Han listened to the dense and mournful howls of wolves coming from the forest, and once again felt grateful that he had just left and did not provoke that woman. That woman is too scary, even the packs of wild wolves are not her match. She's just like a grim reaper. Chapter 5. This wife, he is willing to recognize her. You are listening at novel-full.audio. The subordinates of Lin Han, the head of the yamen, listened to the constant barking of wolves in the forest and also thought of that strange woman. They were now extremely grateful that they had listened to their own leader's words and did not cause any trouble for her. Zhou Yan held Zhou Yan with one hand in half, and Zhou Noa with the other. They were still unconscious and hadn't woken up yet. Zhou Yan looked at the two with some concern, and then looked up at the depths of the dense forest. She was very worried about Yushan. The smell of blood grew stronger and stronger. Even the most resilient person supported the big tree and began to vomit loudly. Cough. 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 Zhou Yan coughed up heavily with black blood stasis, and he opened his already swollen eyes absent-mindedly. Looking into the sky, his eyes were filled with resentment towards this world. Even if he had become a walking corpse, he would have destroyed this dynasty that their whole family sacrificed their lives to protect. He wants to turn this dynasty into a purgatory in order to relieve his hatred. Zhou Zhao saw Zhou Yan wake up and shed tears of joy. Just now, she was afraid that her brother would never wake up again. "Brother! Are you awake?" Zhou Yan looked at Zhou Zhao in shock, tears mixed with blood on his face dripping down his cheeks. "Ah Zhao, you." Zhou Zhao shook his head at Zhou Yan, and she comforted him with her eyes full of despair. "Brother, it was my sister.In.Law who saved me. She." Zhou Zhao looked towards the forest with some concern. "Sister-in-law, she's still in the woods." Zhou Yan looked at the dense blood droplets reflected in the sunlight shining through the layers of leaves in the dense forest, and listened to the howling of the wolf pack in the forest. His heart was filled with surprise. That cowardly woman who was forced by Suzhou and Hangzhou to marry her as a substitute bride, and was implicated in prison and exiled by herself before finishing her wedding service. Zhou Yan had met Su Yushan by chance at the Su mansion when he had just signed a marriage contract with Su Yuning, before he went on a military expedition with his family. But at that time, she was so cowardly that anyone could step on her feet, and she was so scared that she could shrink into a ball at every banquet. How could such a cowardly woman have such a big difference before and after? Has Su Yushan been secretly rescued by Su Hang in the prison? If that's really the case, then who is she? The assassin who came to kill himself after changing his appearance. At the thought of this possibility, his eyes were filled with immense anger. He had already been picked out by them to break his tendons and become a useless person. Those people still didn't want to let go of him. Ha! He's really putting a lot of effort into their lives. When Zhou Yan thought of the towering emperor, his heart was filled with bloodthirsty hatred. His sister, in order to save herself, committed all the crimes and committed suicide in front of the court in front of Man Chaoan and Wu. He wants revenge. He wants those who step on the blood of their families to fall into hell and apologize to his parents, uncles, aunts, sisters, brothers. Where is Zhou Nuo? Zhou Zhao held Zhou Nuo to his side, feeling somewhat worried. "Arnold, you haven't woken up yet, what should you do?" Zhou Yan looked at Zhou Nuo, whose eyes were tightly closed, and lifted his arm, his hand weakly hanging on his wrist. He wrapped his arms around Zhou Nuo and looked at him unconscious, his eyes filled with worry. "Ah Zhao, go and see her. It's really us who implicated her." Although Zhou Yan did not say who she was, Zhou Zhao knew that his brother was worried about his sister.In.Law. "I know. After leaving Zhou Nuo with Zhou Yan, Zhou Zhao will go to the forest to find Yushan." In the blood-colored rain curtain of the forest, a slender black figure faintly emerged from the forest. As the shadow approached, a woman walked out with a murderous aura emanating from all over her body. Her long hair hung down, covering her cold face, and her white prison uniform was dyed red with wolf blood. At the moment everyone outside the woods saw her, their pupils were contracting violently, and they gasped in fear. This woman is simply a grim reaper. In an instant, it will take the lives of all of them. Zhou Yan turned around and saw such a jade mountain, cold and bloodthirsty, as if she was not a real person. His heart pounded wildly, and his pupils shrank. Su Yushan was not the woman he had seen before in the Su mansion. It seems that Su Hang has really replaced the real Su Yushan. So she is very likely the person sent by Suzhou and Hangzhou to kill herself. As soon as Zhou Yan thought of such a possibility, he laughed at himself and tugged at the corner of his mouth. He was already a useless person to be fooled by, and those people were really worried about not seeing their own bodies. Yushan, who had walked out of the forest, was not feeling well at the moment. Her footsteps were floating, her eyes darkened, and she instantly fell to the ground. Sister-in-law. Zhou Zhao ran up nervously and quickly hugged Yushan, whose body was starting to decline. Yushan only came and glanced at Zhou Zhao before completely fainting. Zhou Zhao struggled to hold on to Yushan and dragged her to Zhou Yan's place, anxiously saying, "Brother. Sister-in-law, I fainted. Put her down, let me take a look." Zhou Yan's pitch-black eyes stared fixedly behind Yushan's ear, his eyes not missing any clues, hoping to find evidence that she was not Su Yushan. For a long time, disappointment flashed in Zhou Yan's eyes. He did not see any signs of change on her face, and the birthmark on her face also indicated that she was Su Yushan herself. But how could a person have such a big difference before and after? The change was so great that it almost turned into another person. But he couldn't find any trace that she wasn't Su Yushan. Zhou Zhao nervously looked at Yushan lying on the ground with tightly closed eyes and asked with concern. "Brother, how are you doing?" Zhou Yan shook his head. "It's okay, she just suddenly lost her strength and fainted. She'll recover after taking a break." Zhou Zhao felt guilty as he took Yushan from the ground into his arms, wiped away his tears, and blamed himself. "She's all trying to save me." Zhou Yan carefully looked at Yushan's pale face, which had passed out of consciousness. Speaking of which, he had never carefully looked at Su Yushan. In the past, he only wanted to go to the battlefield with all his heart to fulfill his ambitions. Without love in his heart, he naturally wouldn't look at women too much. And although his marriage with Su Yuning was sudden and he was also ruthless towards her, he could not resist the orders of his parents. So, bearing the title of Su Yushan's future brother-in-law, he wouldn't always stare at his future wife and sister. And his own cultivation will also constrain his behavior, not casually looking at other women and behaving like that. Besides, although Su Yushan is Su Yuning's illegitimate sister, she doesn't see herself many times. Moreover, every time she sees herself, she timidly lowers her head. So he only knew that she had a terrifying birthmark on her face, and he didn't know how she looked. On the day of their wedding was not yet completed, let alone when the veil was lifted, they were hastily pulled away and imprisoned by the guards who broke into the mansion. It can be said that he just had the opportunity to carefully examine his wife's appearance. It was only today that he realized that Su Yushan was actually very beautiful, 3 points more beautiful than her sister Su Yuning, the most beautiful woman of the Yuan dynasty. But because she almost covers the red birthmark on the left side of her face, it makes people think she is an ugly woman. But just by looking at her seductive face on the right, it is clear that without this birthmark, she must be a stunning beauty. Zhou Yan thought of Su Yushan's life.Saving kindness to his sister today, and his gaze towards her was much gentler. No matter why she changed so much before and after, now he is very grateful to her. Today, she not only saved Zhao, but also redeemed herself. He is willing to recognize his wife who was married by Su Hang, regardless of her motives. From now on, consider her as my only wife in this lifetime. Chapter 6. Salt-free women paired with ugly men is really a perfect match. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Han, sitting in the distance, looked at Yushan, who had already passed out in Zhou Zhao's arms, and his eyes flickered and flickered. This woman's strength is too strong for him to provoke now. It seems that he needs to find another opportunity. The light in the forest gradually dimmed, and the remaining sunlight from the sunset in the western mountains was completely blocked by the dense forest, unable to show any light. It seems that it is obviously impossible to continue on the journey. Besides, Su Yushan, the god of great slaughter, has just killed all the wolf pack. This place is relatively safer than other forests. Lin Han immediately decided to rest here for the night and rush on the road tomorrow morning. Moreover, half of the yamen runners who died today had to think carefully about how he would hand over the task to Chao Xian when these people arrived at the next prefecture. Lin Han glanced at Zhou Yan and his men in the distance, and ordered his men to cook mantu. Rest here tonight and continue on your journey tomorrow morning. The prisoners breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing that they were no longer on their way, touching their hungry stomachs. They wanted to go to the forest to find anything to eat, but now the forest was full of corpses and blood. So many people took a detour and ran further, taking a detour to another forest in search of food. Lin Han looked at the criminals running around to find food, not worried about them escaping. He went to the place of exile. Well, maybe he could still live. If he really wanted to escape, he would become a wanted person, with only a dead end. Zhou Zhao helped Zhou Yan to a sturdy tree, allowing him to sit half still. Then he ran over and bent down to embrace Zhou Noa, who was lying next to Yushan. As soon as Zhou Zhao picked up Zhou Noa, the little one woke up and hugged her tightly. His eyes were full of fear, and he cried out. "Sister! Wow! Woo-woo! Woo-woo!" Zhou Zhao looked at her with a heart-wrenching expression. 8-year-old Zhou Noa was thrown out by the yamen guard and hit his head, causing him to fall into a coma. He had just woken up. She is still just a child, because she is the youngest child of their generation, and when she was in the mansion, she was even spoiled by her older brothers and sisters. I have never seen such a scene before. With tears in his eyes, Zhou Zhao coaxed her softly. "Sister, there you are, not afraid." The tears in Zhou Zhao's eyes couldn't help flowing out anymore. She hugged Zhou Noa and comforted him, hoping that he would no longer cry. In the distance, Zhou Yan gritted his teeth tightly, his mouth full of blood. His anger filled his heart, turning the river and the sea into a deep sea of hatred. He wanted revenge. He wants those people to taste the taste of human purgatory too. Yushan on the ground frowned tightly, and a muffled voice of pain surged out of her throat. Sister-in-law. Are you awake?" Yushan's entire body muscles and veins almost went berserk because she had just exhausted them, and her vigorous internal energy was surging everywhere in her body, causing her to spasm recklessly. Yushan frowned in pain. "Sister-in-law. Woo-woo. Woo-woo." Zhou Noa saw that Yushan was awake and opened his hands to seek comfort from her. On the way to exile, Zhou Noa had to lie in Yushan's arms every night to fall asleep. Zhou Noa felt that she had a feminine aura and was even more reluctant to leave her for half a step. Zhou Zhao saw that Zhou Noa insisted, so he could only hold Zhou Noa over and let Yushan hold her. As soon as Zhou Noa arrived in Yushan's arms, he grabbed her with all his limbs and rubbed her head against her embrace. Yushan endured the cramping pain in her arm and raised her hand to pat Zhou Noa's head, gently comforting her. "Don't cry, Arnold is the strongest." Zhou Zhao looked at Yushan with some concern. She knew that Yushan was weak and couldn't stand up. After all, it was her who had been taking care of the unconscious Yushan on the road of exile before merging with her brother. "Sister-in-law, can you stand up now?" Zhou Zhao looked at Yushan with some concern. She was really afraid that Yushan would fall into a coma and be unable to wake up. Otherwise, on the journey of exile, she would have to take care of 2 adults who were unable to move and 1 child alone, which was really heartless and powerless. Yushan naturally saw Zhou Zhao's concern. She was now able to control this body, but the cost was relatively high. She has no internal strength at all now, and only the wood-type spiritual root is left in the 5 series spiritual root. She has confidence in practicing her internal strength again. But I don't know if the other 4 spiritual roots can still be stimulated. After all, she's not very sure about things that don't belong to this world. Fortunately, her spiritual spring space followed, and she was able to suddenly explode and kill the yamen runner. It was the spiritual spring in the crescent birthmark that softened the pulling force between her soul and this physical body. Otherwise, she will definitely die again today. Sure, I shouldn't suddenly fall into a coma again now. Upon hearing Yushan's words, Zhou Zhao breathed a sigh of relief. She helped Yushan stand up and then carried Zhou Noa towards the half-sitting Zhou Yan. Zhou Yan looked at Yushan approaching him, her face still pale and devoid of blood. Her ethereal and powerless steps showed him how much Yushan had paid for them. Thank you. Yushan looked at the deep bone marrow scar on Zhou Yan's right face and silently raised her eyebrows. She supported the big tree and slowly sat down. Salt-free woman paired with ugly man is really a perfect match. She was also a person who had fought on the battlefield, and she could naturally see from Zhou Yan's ugly scar how fierce the war was at that time, and how dangerous he was to save his life. No need to thank you, actually I really admire you. Yushan's light and floating words were like a sharp sword piercing into his heart in an instant. His heart was painful and bitter, even wetting his tough man's eyes. He originally thought that the dynasty that his parents and uncles exchanged for with their own lives would treat these orphans well. But what greeted them was one conspiracy after another. A false testimony led to the emperor, who held high and had been supported by their ancestors for generations, being convicted of plagiarism and extermination. He has no way to appeal, and even his close friends who used to be close friends have been abandoned by his family. Since he was falsely accused and imprisoned, he has forgotten his high spirit as a general, and his pride has been trampled upon by those people. He also accepted his fate of being destined to rot in the mud. The only thing he was dissatisfied with was his unwillingness to bear the stigma of rebellion despite the loyalty and martyrdom of the Marquis's mansion, so he wanted to resist and fight for innocence. But now, as a useless person, he even needs the help of a woman to save his sister. He really doesn't know the meaning of continuing to live. Yushan looked at the despair in Zhou Yan's eyes and let out a deep sigh. His hatred, his unwillingness, how could she not understand? But the first thing they need to do now is to preserve themselves, and then slowly plan for it in the future. Live well, there will be opportunities. Zhou Yan's slightly red eyes looked at Yushan in surprise. How could she understand herself? Even his sister urged him to accept his fate, but she surprisingly, Zhou Zhao saw that many prisoners who had found food around had returned, and they had not eaten for a few days. She wanted to go to the forest to see if there was any food left. Brother, look at my sister.In.Law and Arnold, I'll go find something to eat. Yushan reached out and grabbed Zhou Zhao, shaking her head. Don't go, give me the bamboo cup. Chapter 7. Sister-in-law, another group of wild wolves has arrived. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Zhao looked at Yushan strangely, then went to pick up the bamboo cup she had made on the way to Exile. Yushan took the bamboo cup and stood up trembling, supporting the big tree. Zhou Yan's eyes flashed with concern. He had always been a clumsy person who couldn't express himself, and he didn't know how to express his concerns. Yushan held on to the tree and slightly moved her legs. Her legs were still slightly spasmodic, and she walked slowly into the forest. Brother, sister.In.Law. Zhou Yan held Zhou Nuo, his deep eyes flickering with emotions that Zhou Zhao couldn't understand. Listen to your sister.In.Law. Zhou Yan watched as Yushan disappeared into the forest, and he understood her concerns. He agreed with her approach very much. There are too many people who will take their lives. In the forest, there will not only be wild beasts but also hidden enemies. Zhou Zhao does not know martial arts and is indeed not suitable for traveling alone. Yushan quickly returned with a bamboo cup in her hand. She had already dripped a few drops of Lingquan water from the bamboo cup. If it weren't for Lingquan Space's efforts to save herself, Lingquan water would be dripping drop by drop now. She would have let them all drink Lingquan water, not like saving it now. Nowadays, a group of sick and disabled young children dare not get sick at all. Lingquan water not only has the effect of stopping hunger, but also can completely eliminate all diseases, detoxify all kinds of toxins, and be beneficial to their bodies. She handed the bamboo cup to Zhou Zhao and reminded him. Drink these. Yushan handed the yellow fruits in her hand to Zhou Nuo and asked her to eat them first. Then throw the sweet potatoes she just took out of the space onto the ground, ready to grill over fire. There are quite a few crops and food reserves in her space, but it's not suitable to take them all out now, so she can only endure for a few days. Yushan sat on the ground, gathering the hay and dead branches that Zhou Zhao had just picked up, starting a fire with a fire hammer, and then throwing all the sweet potatoes into the fire. Zhou Yan looked at the water in the bamboo cup and looked at Yushan in surprise. How could a delicate young lady in her deep boudoir understand these knowledge of wilderness survival while marching outside? Brother. Zhou Yan looked at Zhou Zhao, who hesitated and dared not drink, and reassured her to drink. Drink it, this is the water stored in the bamboo pole vine, but don't drink too much as it will numb your mouth. Zhou Zhao took 2 sips of water and found that it was not tasty, but not difficult to drink. However, due to the lack of water, he was reluctant to drink more, so he gave all the remaining water to Zhou Yan. Zhou Yan took 2 sips of water and gave it to Zhou Nuo, but Zhou Nuo was eating wild fruits and didn't want to drink it. He decided to put the bamboo cup aside and let Zhou Nuo drink it later. Yushan looked up at Zhou Yan's movements and didn't say anything. She took the last bamboo cup from her bag and went to the mountains and forests. When she returned, she had 3 more water sacks in her hand, which she had placed in the space before, so she simply took them all out. Yushan handed the bamboo cup to Zhou Zhao and then the water bag to Zhou Yan. She met Zhou Yan's skeptical gaze and said without hesitation. I picked it up in the forest, I don't know if you dare to drink it. Zhou Yan knew she was referring to the officials who died in the forest. He reached out to take it, opened the water bag, and poured it in one gulp. Wine. The pungent taste of alcohol dissolved in the stomach, instantly warming my internal organs. Yushan took the remaining 2 water sachets, one containing pearl milk tea, to Zhou Zhao. She doesn't like sweetness, but she likes to order sweetness after every murder, so there are indeed many desserts in her space. Thinking of the cake and mousse stored in the space, I can only find a better reason to take them out after a while. How sour. Zhou Nuo's small face was wrinkled with sourness, and Yushan was instantly amused. This is the fruit of the pole-carrying vine, which is indeed sour, but in the mountains and wilderness, we can only eat these. Zhou Zhao quickly opened the water bottle that Yushan had given her and fed it to Zhou Nuo. When Zhou Nuo drank the sweet pearl milk tea, he immediately laughed. Sister, this is sweet, and there are also round balls. Drink well. Zhou Zhao took a skeptical sip of the water in his water bag, and the faint aroma of milk melted in his mouth. Sister-in-law, where did you pick it up? I'll go pick up 2 more. Yushan grabbed her and shook her head. Don't go, you'll be scared if you go. These 3 water sacks are also the only ones I have found. Zhou Zhao's scalp tingled as he thought of the fragmented bodies of wild wolves in the forest, and he could only rest his mind. Zhou Yan looked at Yushan strangely. No one else could find it, but she could. Is she really so lucky? Zhou Yan's deep eyes turned towards Yushan, with a guarded expression in his eyes. Yushan raised her eyebrows, truly a person who had fought, and her mind was sharp. She sighed helplessly. You should be aware of what kind of presence I am in the Su mansion. Zhou Yan actually only met Su Yushan twice in the Prime Minister's mansion, and each time they hurried by. He actually didn't know her days in the Prime Minister's mansion. However, no matter how bad Suzhou and Hangzhou are to you, they won't let you eat grass roots and tree bark. Yushan thought of the scene in the original owner's memory, where she saw the original owner secretly digging grass roots in the backyard to cook food for her sister, and her heart suddenly twitched fiercely. That's not her own emotion, it's a deep wound left in the original owner's heart. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to resist shedding tears when she thought about it. Yushan interrupted him with an excited expression. You don't know. Suzhou and Hangzhou don't care about you. Our 2 sisters' life or death. We are just a chip for him to get married in exchange for power. My stepmother controls the backyard, and the servants are even more discerning. Over the years, my sister and I survived by digging grass in the backyard. Zhou Yan looked at the clear tears dripping from the corner of Yushan's eyes, and his heart suddenly pricked. I'm sorry, I don't know. He suddenly understood why she kept her head down every time she saw someone, and why she always secretly hid pastries in her sleeves at banquets. Turns out she was just trying to survive, sister-in-law. Zhou Zhao and Zhou Noa both looked at Yushan with heartache. If they had known that she would be living so badly, they would have helped her more at that time. Ahem. Ahem. The forest suddenly heard the howling of wolves one after another, and everyone was so frightened that they all gathered around, looking around vigilantly. Yushan frowned as she listened to the howling of wolves in the forest. She didn't expect there to be 2 waves of wolf packs on this mountain, let alone several times the size of the pack this time. Obviously, Zhou Yan and Lin Han heard the howling of the wolf pack in the sky and also realized that there were at least a few hundred wolves in this pack. Their hearts were all raised to their throats, and this time they were all unlucky. Lin Han even instructed his subordinates to prepare torches for the prisoners. Then have all the subordinates and prisoners hold torches and be on guard. Zhou Yan looked deeply at the green light that began to appear in the distance, and cautiously embraced Zhou Noa into his arms. The howling of wolf packs in the depths of the forest appeared even more terrifying in the silent forest. Zhou Zhao's body shrank tightly against Yushan. Her teeth were trembling with fear. Sister-in-law, what should we do? Another pack of wolves has arrived. Chapter 8. I'll connect your hand and foot tendons. You are listening at novel.Audio. Yushan looked cautiously at the green cold eyes faintly visible in the distance, and there were still many wild wolf corpses in the forest. These livestock were hesitant to take action for a while. She took out the roasted sweet potatoes on the ground and distributed them to Zhou Noa and the others. Eat some food first, there will be a fierce battle soon, we need to save our energy first. Zhou Yan's tendons and ankles have now been picked and broken, becoming useless. Not to mention carrying weapons, he can't even take the food handed over by Yushan. Zhou Zhao was feeding Zhou Noa sweet potatoes and couldn't help but help Zhou Yan. She looked at Yushan for help. Yushan opened the sweet potatoes in her hand, blew them, and when it wasn't too hot, fed them to Zhou Yan. After seeing Yushan blowing sweet potatoes lightly, Zhou Yan's dark eyes flashed with an unnatural light, but now is not the time for him to act coquettishly. Ignoring the heat of the sweet potatoes, he finished half of them in a few bites, and Yushan fed him the other half. After eating half a piece, Zhou Yan didn't plan to eat it anymore and was exiled on the road. The food was too expensive, so he wanted to leave it for them to eat. Yushan couldn't help but know his thoughts and stop him. There are still many sweet potatoes, you eat more, we all need to eat enough, otherwise we will be wasted soon. Zhou Yan knew what Yushan had said, and soon the wild wolves came over, they didn't even know if they could survive, let alone preserve these foods. So after eating 3 more sweet potatoes fed by Yushan, she refused to eat any more. After seeing him finish eating, Yushan started eating on her own, her sharp gaze fixed on the faintly glimmering wolf pack in the distance. They are all women, children, and wounded, and the only one who can contribute is themselves. If she had all her 5 spiritual roots and had not lost her internal strength, she was confident that she would fight against these hundreds of wolves. But now she has lost her internal strength and can only engage in close combat, relying solely on brute force. Her current self is not their match. As a veteran, Zhou Yan naturally knew that Yushan had just dissipated her internal strength, which was also the reason for his concern. We don't have the strength to fight them, we can only use our skills, maybe we can still win. Yushan turned her gaze to Zhou Yan, who was shining with confidence in her eyes. Such Zhou Yan seemed like a victorious general on the battlefield. What are your thoughts? Zhou Yan pushed the water bag that Yushan had given him out of his leg with his arm. The water bag slipped off his leg and fell to the ground with a snap. Yushan instantly understood his meaning. Both of them were people who had fought on the battlefield, and some words didn't need to be explained, so she knew what they meant. Zhou Zhao looked at the two of them in confusion. Brother and sister.in.law are really a perfect match. Although Zhou Yan was young, he had to eat 3 small sweet potatoes this time because he had been starving for a long time. After seeing that Zhou was full, Yushan took her to search for many dry branches and wild grass around her. Then they circled around them with these branches. After seeing it, other prisoners also went to pick up branches and surrounded themselves. Lin Han looked at the branches around Yushan and the others, and a dark light flashed in his eyes. Miss Su, there are many wolf crowds now, so it's better for us to stick together. Many people have great power, and we have more hope for survival. Yushan's cold eyes looked at him, as if trying to see through him. Lin Han almost felt like he was about to be seen through by her. No need, thank you very much for your kindness. We, as a group of people, can only drag you down. Lin Han originally wanted Yushan to charge into battle. After all, her strength was obvious to all, but it was obvious that they didn't want to interfere with them. Many prisoners and officials began to resent her. She used to be so powerful that even waving her hand could solve dozens of wolves. I don't even want to care about them now. These wolves are all attracted by her. Miss Su. These wolves are all caused by you. You can't ignore our lives. That's it. If it weren't for you, would we be surrounded by a pack of wolves? Miss Su, save people to the end. We are all a group of helpless women and children. Are you going to save us? Otherwise, we won't even close our eyes in death. Even if we turn into fierce ghosts, we won't let you go. Zhou stared at the speakers, his anger rolling in his face. These shameless people, do you still have a conscience? If it weren't for my sister.in.law saving you, you would have been raped by the evil government officials long ago. Not only do you not know how to be grateful, but now I also want my sister in.law to spare her life for you. I'll be your shield. Where did you get such big faces? It was originally the wolf pack she brought in, and of course she has a responsibility to help us drive them away. You. Zhou was gasping for breath from their shameless faces. Yushan pulled her down and asked her to sit down. There was no need to be angry with these people, it was all her own anger. Zhou Yan's deep black eyes looked at Lin Han and the others, with a cold killing intent in his eyes. If his hand was not useless, he would be the first to kill them. Yushan's calm gaze glanced lightly at the noisy crowd, and with just one glance, they closed their mouths. Her gaze was so terrifying that it didn't seem like she was looking at a living person. It made them unconsciously think of the cold and ruthless person that Yushan caught a glimpse of while killing the yamen guards in the forest, and then all the yamen guards died suddenly in the wind. Yushan looked at the few branches surrounding them, so she took Zhou and walked deeper into the forest, bringing back many more branches. The yamen guards and prisoners saw their movements and followed them to search for many branches in the forest. Even though they kept running around in the forest, the distant wolf pack still stood there quietly without any movement. After Yushan finally felt that there were enough branches around them, she looked up and saw that the wolf pack was no longer in the distance. The wolf pack suddenly left just now. I wonder if it will come over for a while. Zhou Yan kept an alert eye on the wolf pack while Yushan and Zhou were running back and forth, and promptly explained to Yushan. Yushan sat down next to Zhou Yan and nodded. We were probably intimidated by the bodies of wild wolves in the forest, so we are temporarily safe. Zhou hugged Zhou Yan and leaned against the big tree, tired, and closed his eyes. After a tiring day, both of them fell asleep for a short while. She was quite frightened today, coupled with the recent days of running around, and she was really tired. Besides, the wolf pack won't come over now. Yushan also has a heart to let her sleep well for a while. Many people couldn't help but yawn when they saw the wolf pack leave, and when they saw Zhou falling asleep, they also fell asleep. Yushan's hand stretched out the bundle, seemingly taking out needles and thread from the bundle, but in fact, it was taken out from the space. Her first aid kit and various medications were placed on the first floor of the space house for convenience. Her Linquan space not only allows for planting, but also has a house next to the Linquan water that can store anything. There is nothing that cannot be put in except for living things that cannot enter. Because she used to frequently go to the battlefield, there was not only abundant food inside, but also various powerful thermal weapons. Just because Linquan space has automatically returned to its original state in order to save itself. So all the weapons she had placed on the 5th floor were locked up when the 6-story house turned into what is now a thatched cottage. Otherwise, she would throw a flowing cloud bullet over without using her own abilities. Put your hand over and I'll connect your hand and foot tendons. Chapter 9. Don't move, I don't mind you. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Zhou Yan looked at Yushan in surprise and then raised his hand in front of her. Do you understand medicine? With a faint glow, Yushan carefully used a needle to find Zhou Yan's broken tendon and started sewing it. Please hold on, it will hurt a lot. After Yushan finished speaking, she used a needle to pass through his ankle. The speed was so fast that before Zhou Yan could speak, she was suddenly stitched together, causing her to gasp in pain. He gritted his teeth tightly, and cold sweat dripped down from his head. Compared to the pain of being picked off, this pain was nothing, he could bear it. Yushan certainly knew how painful the suture was. There was actually anesthesia in her space, but she didn't have a suitable reason to take it out, so she had to endure it hard. Although the light was dim, Yushan was skilled in her skills. She quickly sewed Zhou Yan's left hand and then picked up Zhou Yan's right hand to continue sewing. The firelight emitted a faint glow, blending the cold and hard lines on her face. Her expression was focused, as if treating her own treasure. Zhou Yan's heart suddenly jumped twice in his chest, and his gaze towards Yushan became much gentler, with tenderness that he didn't even know. He lowered his head and glanced at his left hand, which had its tendons fixed, with a hint of tenderness in his low-pitched voice. Thank you. Actually, what I want to say more is that I'm sorry, it was us who caused you trouble. Upon hearing his soft apology, Yushan raised her eyebrows and remained silent. She had originally planned to wait for them to settle down before sewing his tendons and allowing him to slowly recover from his injuries. But the environment was oppressive, and a pack of wolves in the distance were watching them closely. She couldn't match her 4 fists with her 2 fists, so she could only quickly make Zhou Yan recover. At least when the wolf pack attacked, she could help her keep an eye on the rear. After Yushan sewed all of Zhou Yan's tendons together, she lifted Zhou Yan's legs into her arms. The slight warmth in Yushan's arms, like a warm river, spread along Zhou Yan's injured leg to his heart. His drooping eyelids trembled, and his heart seemed to tremble along with it. He is actually not much cleaner than Yushan on his body. The wound on his knee is severely ulcerated due to crawling, and if he continues to grind it, he will see bones. Zhou Yan looked at his leg being placed in Yushan's arms, and suddenly felt a bit ashamed. He was afraid that his corruption and embarrassment would damage her reputation. The dirt on his body desecrated the sacred radiance on Yushan's body. He felt ashamed and wanted to retract his legs, as if he was still the elegant young master of the past, rather than being so pitiful now. Yushan grabbed his restless leg without lifting her head. She reached out and pulled open his pants, seeing his terrifying wound. Her heart flashed with pity. Such a hero who defended his country should not have suffered such hardships. Yushan's movements softened a lot due to her thoughts, and she comforted him gently. Don't move, I don't mind you. Bang! A gentle sentence shattered Zhou Yan's icy and indifferent heart, causing his hands to tremble slightly and his eyes to turn slightly red. The heart in his chest was filled with warm currents, causing his eyes to shed scorching tears. As if afraid of being seen on his fragile side, Zhou Yan lowered his head, his tightly closed eyes blocking his inner vulnerability. A drop of clear tears slid down from the corner of the eye. Yushan skillfully sewed up both legs of Zhou Yan, and then began to treat the wound on his knee. For the wound on his knee, Yushan has a heart to take good care of it for him. But now she has no excuse for taking medication to treat him, and she is also afraid that exposing herself too much will arouse Zhou Yan's suspicion. This man who has been on the battlefield has a very delicate mind. So he had to first wash the wound with clean water, then rinse him several times with the strong liquor in his water bag, and finally find a clean handkerchief in his bag to wrap around his knee. The conditions are limited, so we can only temporarily handle it this way. There was still a faint pain of being burned by strong liquor on Zhou Yan's knee, but this pain was not a problem for him, he could tolerate it. He lowered his head and looked at his knee, which had been cleaned by Sujihara, with various complex emotions rolling in his pitch-black eyes. "Thank you." Yushan took the opportunity to secretly pour a full cup of liquid water to Zhou Yan while he was not paying attention to his actions. This is the spiritual spring water that has accumulated into a depression during this period, and she has brought it all to him. Now that the situation is urgent, she has no other choice but to find a way to quickly heal his tendons and hands. This way, when the wolf pack comes, it can help oneself resist a part of the wolf pack. Otherwise, as a person with exhausted internal strength, she would be powerless to approach and engage in close combat to protect 3 people. "Drink it." Zhou Yan looked at the full bamboo cup, even though his heart was full of doubts, he didn't ask anything. Although they had only been together for 2 hours just now, he knew very well that Yushan had no ill intentions towards them, and now the only person he could trust was her. The sweet spiritual spring water at the entrance seemed to carry the energy of super-strong vitality, and from his entrance, he penetrated into his own 7 meridians and 8 meridians. He even felt that after absorbing that force, the internal power in the dantian instantly broke free from the poison's confinement on his internal power. He sat up cross-legged and began to silently recite the Heart Sutra. A trace of internal energy overflowed from the dantian and flowed through the meridians of his body with his movements. Although liquid water only caused a crack in the confinement, it has clearly improved significantly compared to my previous situation of being slaughtered. Zhou Yan's eyebrows furrowed tightly, his teeth clenched tightly, and his body was fed with a lot of southern Xinjiang's secret poison. His internal strength was frantically fighting against the accumulated toxins in his body. A lot of cold sweat broke out on his forehead in an instant, and as Zhou Yan desperately worked his internal energy, he suddenly spat out blood. Blood colored with a hint of black aura, Yushan could tell at a glance that Zhou Yan was extremely poisonous. After Zhou Yan spat out blood, his face also began to look ugly, and layers of black mist began to flow up his cheeks from his neck. The black mist was raging and instantly covered Zhou Yan's facial features. Without much time to think, Yushan had to expose her woody ability now, grab Zhou Yan's hand, activate the ability, and send the energy representing the power of life into Zhou Yan's body. As the vibrant energy conveyed by Yushan entered Zhou Yan's body from his arm, it was instantly absorbed by the internal energy running inside his body. They are like hungry gluttons, crazily absorbing the powers inside Yushan's body. Yushan was originally forced to compete for autonomy with this body to save Zhou Zhao, resulting in excessive loss of her own abilities. Nowadays, the remaining wood-based abilities have degenerated to a level where even beginners are inferior, and the energy of the wood-based abilities in the body is pitifully low. Now, after being crazily consumed by Zhou Yan's internal power, her face turned pale in an instant due to the sudden rapid loss of energy and the subsequent failure to replenish it. Her forehead also began to sweat profusely. Chapter 10. Brother. The wolf pack is here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No one saw the green light on Yushan flowing rapidly towards Zhou Yan's body through her hands. As the black mist on Zhou Yan's face dissipated, the woody energy in Yushan's body was also completely absorbed by Zhou Yan. She immediately released her hand and sat cross-legged, activating her powers to absorb the green energy representing strong vitality in the forest. Countless dense green light droplets in the grass were crazily sucked into Yushan's body like fine raindrops, instantly merging into her spiritual space and body. As tens of thousands of green light entered Yushan's body and spiritual space, Yushan's pale face visibly began to turn red. Zhou Yan adjusted his breath and confirmed once again that there was an additional crack in the internal energy barrier of his dantian. Finally, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and opened his eyes. His deep gaze turned to Yushan, who was running the heavenly tuna next to him, as he watched her face turn from pale to rosy. Doubts flashed through Zhou Yan's deep black eyes. As soon as the mysterious power entered his body, it seemed to be carrying a continuous stream of vitality. Not only did it protect his almost poisonous heart and nourish the broken areas of his tendons, but it also strengthened his internal strength. He originally only had 10 years of internal strength, but with the blessing of that mysterious power, he instantly increased by 2 years. Don't be fooled by the fact that it has only grown by 2 years. This is also something that requires martial arts practitioners to work tirelessly for 2 or 3 years day and night to obtain. Zhou Yan looked at Yushan with a deep reflection in his eyes. Is she really the cowardly Su Yushan of the Su family? She seems to have become another person. But he also confirmed that she was Su Yushan herself. Everyone has their own secrets, and he actually has them too. As long as he doesn't harm his family, he won't pursue them to the end. Besides, she not only saved her sister, but also brought him back from the brink of despair, giving herself hope to survive. Her position in her heart is somewhat different. He is even extremely grateful now that he married Su Yushan instead of Su Yuning. Thinking of Su Yuning, who had broken her promise and then betrayed her, a bloodthirsty gleam flashed in his eyes. Zhou Yan picked up the water bag beside him and took a strong sip of liquor. The spicy and stimulating taste melted in his mouth, scorching the beating heart in his chest. His wrist is now able to hold things, although it hasn't recovered to before. At least he can help Yushan fight against the enemy together, so as not to let her fight alone. Yushan, who closed her eyes and absorbed energy, didn't know that Zhou Yan was fine and had thought so much about herself. She is carefully studying the mountain of energy accumulating inside her body. This world, because there has never been a superpower before, has plenty of energy. She originally planned to repair the dry superpowers in her body to deal with the wolf pack for a while. But she only activated a little bit of her superpower, and all the energy in the forest rushed into her body like she didn't want to die. If it weren't for her actively cutting off the absorption of abilities, she would have almost been overwhelmed and died. There are too many green energies representing vitality, all squeezed into one's own body. If they are not immediately evacuated, one will also be cut off by their accumulated meridians and die. Yushan decided to take advantage of the moment and refine them back into her own internal power. As for other 4 types of abilities, including gold, water, fire, and earth, her current physical body cannot be compared to her own body that has been refined into steel in her previous life, and she cannot withstand too many abilities. Otherwise, she wouldn't have saved Zhou Zhaoshi like before, because her body was too weak to block those energies, and her whole body was like a leaking ball, flowing energy everywhere. She didn't want to experience the feeling of being possessed by fire again. Because she wanted to forcefully refine the compressed wood energy inside her body into internal force, Yushan's meridians endured tremendous pain. There are too many impurities in this body, and the original owner is a young lady who has never practiced martial arts. So the time she needs to consume is dozens of times longer than before. Every meridian in her body breaks when she can't bear the huge energy, and then recovers with the healing of the energy, automatically joining together, then breaking and reconnecting. After hundreds of repetitions, Yushan's forehead began to drip beads of sweat as big as beans, and even her rosy face turned into a vegetable color, with an increasingly green appearance. Zhou Yan looked at her with concern, intending to wipe her sweat, but he didn't dare to touch her casually. Nowadays, she can only rely on herself, and others cannot help her. If she succeeds, she will take it to the next level. If she fails, her muscles and veins will be broken, and in severe cases, she will lose her life. This is also the reason why there are not many people practicing martial arts in this world. Ahem. Ahem! Suddenly, the howling of wolves came from afar, and Zhou Zhao was startled to open his eyes and tightly embrace Zhou Noa in his arms. Brother! The wolf pack is here. Ah Zhao, hold on to Arnold and follow me closely. No matter what happens later, don't be too far away from me. Zhou Zhao saw Zhou Yan sitting with both hands on the ground in the direction of Yushan. She quickly hugged Zhou Noa and walked over, sitting next to them. Brother, your hands. Zhou Yan handed Zhou Zhao a wooden stick with the tip sharpened by him. Zhou Zhao took the wooden stick in a daze before realizing that Zhou Yan's hand could hold something, and excitedly looked at his feet. After seeing Zhou Zhao's gaze, Zhou Yan shook his head inside. My foot was severely injured at the time, but now I have attached a tendon and still can't use any force. Besides, even if I can exert force now, my legs are also disabled. Zhou Zhao was a bit disappointed. She forgot that her brother's legs were ruined in the Battle of Jixia City. However, being able to save a life was also a great blessing in misfortune. Sister-in-law, is she? Zhou Zhao glanced at Yushan, whose face had turned completely green, and felt a little frightened. Zhou Yan knew that she might not wake up for a while, so he could only protect her more when the wolf pack came. As the green eyes of the wolf pack approached them, Zhou Yan narrowed his eyes dangerously and asked Zhou Zhao to pour all the wine in his water bag onto dry firewood and light a fire. Lin Han and the others also saw the approaching wolf pack and started lighting torches in front of them. The wolf pack running closer saw the large fires igniting everywhere, clearly feeling a bit scared and afraid to take another step forward. Both sides were facing each other nervously, and neither dared to launch an attack first. Ahem! The head wolf in the distance let out a howl, and the wolf pack all stopped and looked at them. Zhou Yan squinted his eyes dangerously and looked towards the head wolf in the distance. The head wolf was very intelligent, and they were clearly waiting for the fire to burn out before attacking. Lin Han's officials clearly saw it and ordered the prisoners to take precautions with dry firewood for the fire. After seeing through their strategies, the wolf pack couldn't wait any longer and began to pounce, bared their teeth and howled. They had been waiting for too long. They were planning to sneak an attack while they were asleep, but they didn't expect this group of people to be so smart and have been guarding against them. At that moment, many wolf packs began to attack them. The howling of the wolf pack, the painful cries of the prisoner whose arm was bitten off, the sound of sticks, and the sound of a big knife looking at the wolf pack were mixed together. The silent forest is like boiling water, boiling in an instant. Zhou Zhao hugged Zhou Noa tightly, and with the other hand holding a wooden stick, he hit the wolves rushing towards them in the fire circle, trying to shoot them out. But because Zhou Zhao still had to protect Zhou Noa and was a weak woman, every time she used a stick, Zhou Yan had to make up for her and beat the wild wolf before stopping. He had to protect Zhou Zhao alone, himself, and Yushan. In addition, sitting on the ground made it difficult for him to move and felt powerless. The wolf pack also saw it, so they changed their strategy and no longer went up one by one, all swarming in. In another gap where Zhou Yan couldn't resist, a wolf with its fangs wide open pounced on him. Zhou Zhao had just shot out the wild wolf, and as soon as she turned around, she saw this scene. She was so scared that she was terrified and cried out in shock. Brother!